Once, the sun ruled the sky, and men measured time by its warmth. Then came the eclipse, not a moment, but an age. The light dimmed, all but the hardiest crops failed, and the gods fell silent, as if they had died with the sun. Kingdoms withered, and cities walled themselves in flame and faith. Yet some still pushed back against the night, their lanterns burning through an endless dusk that men once called day. Now the only light that endures is man's own, burning bright in the night, as if defiance alone could hold back the dark. But in the cracks between those lights, old hungers whisper. The world holds its breath, and the things born of shadow wait for every chance to snuff it out. In a village called Duskbrook, 4 hunters gather, answering a call few dare to face, to stand against the shadow and whatever waits beyond the lantern's glow. The weeping tankard Duskbrook beneath the rain. The rain had turned to a steady whisper, thin as breath. Duskbrook crouched in it like a wounded thing, shutters nailed, chimneys coughing pale smoke into a sky that no longer remembered the sun. The tavern called the weeping tankard leaned against its own walls, a warped timber frame swollen by age and damp. Inside, the hearth was little more than a sullen glow, just bright enough to show the outlines of those who still believed a roof might keep the dark at bay. The talk was little more than rumor, and rumor was little more than fear. Lanterns going out again in Nathralis, voices in the fog, children gone. Every time the door opened, silence followed. The hunters. They sat apart, though the air between them felt heavy with shared purpose. Edrin Grey sat nearest the fire, hat pulled low, pale hands resting over the hilt of a sword that looked older than the tavern itself. His coat was long, trimmed in travel dust and the smell of gun oil. The others gave him space without meaning to. Something about him carried the stillness of graves. Across from him, Grail leaned against a post, one shoulder catching the light. His face was roughened by hair that grew thicker than most men's, and his eyes had the dull yellow cast of a wolf's beneath hooded lids. He said little, and when he did, it came out like the ground cracking after frost. At another table, Cain Malek read a page of scripture that had been rewritten by blasphemy. Black ink burned into red paper. The bones stitched into his robe clicked softly when he moved. He had the bearing of a scholar and the silence of a man who no longer prayed. Thaddeus Vale filled the quiet with the sound of glass and metal. Small vials rolled across his notes, each one faintly smoking from within. His muttering was half mathematics, half confession. In the corner of his desk sat a locket, face down, its clasp tarnished. He never touched it, but his eyes returned to it between lines of ink. The messenger. The tavern door groaned open, spilling rain, and a man of middling height into the light. He was not remarkable. Brown hair plastered to a plain face, travel-stained cloak dripping onto the floor. But there was something in his posture, a stiffness that came from too many nights glancing over one's shoulder. "I'm looking for the hunters," he said. His voice was polite but thin with exhaustion. Edrin stood, his shadow cutting through the light. "Then you found them." The stranger gave a small bow. "Carvendal, in service to Lord Calves Drymorn, Council of Lanterns. He bids you come with haste. There's coin for your silence, and more for what you can end." Grail watched him for a long moment before grunting, the sound neither acceptance nor refusal. Thaddeus leaned forward, adjusting his spectacles. "End what, precisely?" Dahl's eyes darted toward the window, where the rain veiled the street. "The thing that hunts him." the one they whisper about in Nathralis. It doesn't stay to the city anymore. Cain folded the cursed scripture and set it aside. The Morgul. The word came like dust on the tongue. Edrin's jaw tightened. That name reaches farther than it should. They stepped out into the damp air. The world beyond the tavern was drowned in mist, lanterns guttering, every shadow watching. A boarded carriage waited in the road, its emblem, Draymorn's lantern bound in thorns, half hidden beneath grime. Thaddeus frowned at the wagon's planked windows, a curious design for a noble's carriage. Dahl hesitated. Lord Draymorn prefers his routes unseen. The boards keep prying eyes from guessing which roads lead to his private hunting manor. The explanation carried more tension than comfort. A woman stood beside the wagon, attempting to argue with a tall figure armored in blackened iron. Rain beaded on the tarnished silver mask that covered his face, its shape eerily human, lips and eyes sculpted in calm perfection. His silence was absolute towards her. Captain Rogar Vane, Dahl murmured. Draymorn's personal guard. His armor was burnished black where old fire had kissed it. When he spoke, the words came hollow from behind the unmoving silver visage. The Lord dislikes attention, Vane said. The less the townsfolk know of his travel, the better. The woman, Warden Lyra Vance, turned as the group approached. Rain slicked the braids of her auburn hair and glimmered on the edge of the short blades at her hips. "You're Draymorn's men?" she asked, voice steady, though her eyes betrayed fatigue. "Contractors," Edrin replied. Her gaze flicked to Vane, then back to them. "You'll find no welcome eastward. Since your lord passed through, bad omens have settled here. Goblins in the timberline and something else. Cloaked, taller than most men. It watches from the fields at night." "Has it harmed anyone?" Edrin asked. Lyra's gaze wavered. "A few have gone missing. Quiet folk, the sort who keep to their own. We tell ourselves it's wolves or the river, but—" Her voice fell lower, a whisper meant only for them. "It's the goblins, mostly. They've taken the children. No one wants to say it aloud. Not while the fog still listens." She looked like she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. "If you're set on this, mind your lanterns. The fog carries whispers." She nodded towards them, then turned away. Dahl climbed to the driver's bench, pulling his hood tight. Captain Vane settled beside him, with the creak of iron. Inside the boarded carriage, the hunters sat in silence, broken only by the clatter of hooves. Thaddeus's hand found the locket and turned it once before hiding it again. Cain traced invisible runes on his staff, eyes half closed. Grail stared at nothing, the growl in his chest as quiet as breath. Edrin stared at the wall as if he could still peer into the mist ahead. Behind them, the weeping tankard faded into shadow. The night waited, wide and patient, and somewhere beyond the rain-choked roads, the Morgul hunted the living. "ID." Rain whispered on the wagon roof, the rhythm slowing as they rolled through low hills tufted with wet grass. A pale fog crawled up from the ditches, and the dark wall of the eastern forest loomed closer with every turn of the wheels. The horses began to fret. On the driver's bench, Carven Dahl muttered, squinting ahead. "Something's wrong." Roads choked ahead. Beside him, Captain Rogar Vane sat motionless, the silver mask reflecting the faint light of the lantern. "Stop the wagon," he said quietly. Dahl hesitated. "We're not to open it until we reach the estate, Captain." "Lord's orders. Then I assume you mean to help me dispatch this lot while they stay inside." Rogar's tone was flat, almost bored. Dahl swallowed. No, Captain." "Then open it," said Rogar. The wagon creaked to a halt. The door latch snapped and cold air spilled in. 8 men seen stood in the road ahead, ragged shapes blurred by mist. A leader with a crossbow leveled it lazily toward the horses. 2 shadows flanked out along the hillsides, slipping through the grass. "Out of the wagon," the bandit called. "Drop your steel and no one has to die." Edrin Gray stepped down first, coat snapping in the wind. "Always the same bargain," he murmured. "You'll find we don't trade well." The first bolt hissed past his shoulder, then the chaos broke open. Thaddeus Vale hurled a flask that burst into a column of orange fire. The lead horse screamed and reared. Smoke rolled over the road. Grail leapt into the blaze, axe flashing. His first swing crushed a shield aside, the second took the man's leg. A second bandit lunged, blade catching Grail's side. Blood welled. The wolfborn snarled, shoving him backward and splitting his helm with a downward blow. Cain Malik raised his staff, chanting through the chaos. The air darkened. A shimmer of shadow clung to one of the flankers. He screamed as black veins spread up his arms, dropping his weapon. Cain's focus wavered as another arrow grazed his shoulder, spinning him half around. Edrin moved through the firelight, parrying a crude saber and driving his bastard sword into a bandit's chest. A second came from behind. Edrin turned too slow. The blow glanced off his coat's steel lining but jarred his arm numb. "Left," he barked. Thaddeus responded instantly, tossing a small vial that burst in white smoke. The attacker stumbled, rubbing at his eyes. "Keep low," Edrin called. "Easy for you to say," Thaddeus coughed, pulling a fragment of glass from his glove. "These cheap vials keep breaking." The leader raised his crossbow again, firing into the fog. The bolt struck Grail in the thigh. The wolfborn grunted, snapping the shaft and pressing forward anyway. The 2 flankers appeared from the hills, silent, curved knives in hand. One slipped toward the wagon, the other toward Cain. Then Rogar finally moved from his statue-like stance. He stepped from the shadows beside the wagon like something forged out of the night itself. The silver mask caught the dim light, expressionless. The first sneak never finished his breath. Rogar's greatsword swept upward, and a dull red mist followed. The second turned to flee, but Rogar's blade fell once more, a single heavy motion that sent the man sprawling in silence. "Captain!" Tal shouted from the driver's bench as another arrow whistled past his ear. He ducked, nearly falling from the seat. "Get inside," Edrin ordered him. The man dove into the wagon, slamming the door behind him. The fight dragged on. Mud, steel, and breath. Cain sent a curse spiraling into the leader's mind. The man staggered, eyes wide, firing blind into the air. Edrin whispered to the void. A spectral steed burst from black smoke, hooves pounding like thunder. He mounted in one motion, blade drawn. The horse carried him through the fray, its form flickering with ghostlight as Edrin's sword struck home. A crimson mist hung in the rain behind him, the leader falling. Grail limped but still fought, using the weight of his axe to break through the last man's guard. Thaddeus lobbed a final bottle that burst against a shield, throwing shards of fire across the mud. The man dropped screaming into the rain. Then, silence. Only the crackle of dying flames and the groan of settling armor. Rogar stood apart, sword lowered, rain running from the edge of his tarnished silver mask. He looked across the road where bodies steamed in the mist. "Efficient," he said, voice echoing hollow from behind the metal. Edrin sheathed his blade. "Men like these remind me," Edrin said, voice low, "that not all monsters hide in the dark." Thaddeus dabbed blood from a cut on his temple. "My supplies need to be replenished. I hope Greymorn has a place for me to work." He reached in his bag, and started pulling out some healing concoctions he had prepared. Kane murmured a series of curses over a few of the bodies, and cutting off the pinky finger of one of them with a small dagger. Edrin crouched over the leader's body, prying a damp parchment from his coat. He read it aloud. The rain seemed to listen. After the job is done, meet at the old quarry. Remember, leave no survivors. Edrin's gaze met Rogar's. They weren't common thieves. No, the captain said softly, turning back toward the wagon. No, they weren't. He wiped his sword clean on a fallen cloak, the silver mask unreadable. The road climbed, and the rain thinned to mist. After another hour, the boarded wagon creaked up a long hill toward a manor crouched on its crown, Drymorn's hunting lodge, though it was larger than most nobles' keeps. Lanterns guttered along the drive, their flames dimming and flaring as if they breathed. Stone hounds watched from the steps with moss in their teeth. The horses slowed, uneasy. From the driver's bench, Carven Dahl glanced back, voice low. Almost there. Gather your things. His hands were steady on the reins, but his eyes kept cutting to the trees as if counting shadows. At the crest they halted beneath a portico of black timber. Before the door opened, Edrin faintly heard Rogar's hollow voice from ahead, speaking to someone within. They held the line, efficient under pressure. A second voice, smooth, cultured, warmed by wine, answered with a murmur of pleasure. Dahl climbed down and opened the wagon. Lord Drymorn will receive you, he said. Rain beaded on his plain coat. He looked like a simple man, dark hair and brown eyes, until you caught the tired intelligence behind his gaze. Best not keep him waiting. Inside the manor, the air was warmer but less welcoming. The corridors were tall, the wood dark, the carpets old and quiet. At the end of a long hall, a study glowed with firelight and a dozen lanterns, each flickering in a way that made the walls seem to breathe. Sometimes when the light dipped, a faint murmur passed the ear like someone speaking in the next room. Lord Calvus Drymorn stood beside the hearth, one hand on a decanter, the other turning a signet as if it were a thought made metal. Tall, silver at the temples, he had the poise of a man accustomed to deciding how other men live. Rogar Vane stood to his right in piecemeal black, the tarnished silver mask a calm, unmoving face that reflected the room's fire. Dahl stayed near the door, hat in both hands, a servant who watched and remembered. Welcome, Drymorn said, not looking up from the fire until the word finished. You made good time, and good use of it dispatching those bandits. His eyes took them in with polite interest that never reached warmth. Rest, drink, then we'll talk of the thing that haunts my house. Edrin remained standing. We'll talk first. A thin smile. As you wish. They took the study's chairs. The fire settled. Somewhere a silver clock ticked with surgical patience. What can you tell us about it? Kane asked, voice flat. Drymorn's gaze held the flames. When he spoke, the words came slow, measured. It doesn't seem to speak, not that has been heard at least. Scholars call it the Morgul. Names comfort men more than they injure monsters. He angled the glass, watching the wine turn. From what they have gathered, it does not come from this plane of existence. It's summoned, drawn across the shadow veil by will and blood. That's the only way such a thing touches our realm. It doesn't walk here. It forces its way in, through weakness, or is called upon. Thaddeus's quill scratched once across a scrap of paper. And it hunts. How? It seems to hunt by scent, not of flesh, but of fear. It follows guilt, sin, and secrets like a hound follows blood. The more one hides, the closer it gets, Drymorn said with a small, humorless sound. He finally looked at them. Steel wounds it, but only temporarily. Light and iron drive it back. Blessed water slows it. But kill it? No. You can disperse it, make it fade for a time. It always returns, waits in the shadows, planning its next attack. The lantern nearest the hearth guttered low, and for an instant the room seemed farther away, as if seen through water. When it brightened, Drymorn went on as if nothing had changed. It takes pleasure in causing fear. It tests. It keeps trophies. What remains is hollow. Grail shifted, the bandage at his thigh darkening through the cloth. Does it bleed? He said, voice gravel. What else can you tell us about how it fights? Drymorn's expression flickered. Yes, but the blood seems to wisp away into shadowy smoke. It moves like water given will, but it did seem pained once. Rogar saw it hesitate on a threshold at my manor in the city. His eyes cut to a distant memory. Pain there, for a moment. Edrin's gaze held him. And your men? Rogar answered, voice dull behind the unmoving silver lips. Most dead before we drove it to shadow. It fades when pressed hard enough, reforms elsewhere. Drymorn poured a small degree of wine and set the decanter down, as if placing a piece on a board. Which is why I sent for you. The Council of Lanterns is being culled. The pattern is not random. He turned the signet once. Before another light goes out, I ask you, find it and tell me how to end it, or end it for me. Edrin did not sit back. Before we accept coin, we would like to know whether we've already been tested for it. Face twisting with a little irritation. Silence held for a heartbeat. The silver clock ticked and the fire sighed. Drymorn's smile was thin and practiced. Men talk. Some take risks to measure the worth of what they would purchase. He spread a hand. You are alive. Your worth is proven. 8 men paid for that proof, Edrin said. Someone wrote them a letter promising coin and insisting there be no survivors. Bandits, Drymorn said, almost gentle. Loose blades cut throats in the dark. Better they be broken now than later against something worse. He set the glass down, and the ring clicked softly on crystal. We all do necessary work. Thaddeus's eyes dipped to the lanterns. They flickered again, and for a breath there was a hush like someone listening from between the book spines. Who profits from the council dying? Kane asked. Names. Drymorn weighed the question in his mouth before letting it out. Lady Varisthiolysane, the Ash Matriarch. She burns more than coal in her furnaces, if whispers are true. She covets river access, I hold. He looked past them at the window's black reflection. High Prior Jorath Vane, priest who sees judgment everywhere but in himself. Give him a tragedy, and he'll call it penance, and try to make more, to prove the point. He let the smirk show, and then filed it away. Mistress Corrith would sell another 1,000 lanterns if fear stays high. The council is a street market. Men sell anything if the night is cold enough. Or you summoned it and can't leash it, Edrin said. Drymorn's smile thinned further. Certainty is a luxury for survivors. I read the board while others play. What would you gain from their deaths? Kane pressed. Drymorn placed 2 fingers on the table, as if pinning down a map. Power, naturally. But do not insult me. I am not fool enough to deal in shadows I cannot command. If I were to move on the other lanterns, I'd do so cleanly, without the stench of dark magic upon my hands. He looked at Edrin then, not at the wine or the fire. You ask the right questions. Ask them loudly in the wrong room, and you'll have fewer answers left to use. He let the words linger a moment, the crackle of the hearth swallowing the silence. Nathralis has many secrets, and their masters will do anything to keep them. Edrin's stare did not break. Monsters aren't the only evil that needs killing in this world. Across from him, Rogar's head turned slightly, the silver face giving nothing. Edrin reached into his coat and drew out a small, corked vial. "Salt water," he said, "a test of purity. Curses and puppeteers show their seams when the mouth is salt and the name is spoken." He drank, grimacing, then offered it. "Your turn, Lord." Drymorn's brows rose, as if amused by a provincial ritual. He drank without comment. Edrin watched for a twitch, a spasm, a misaligned shadow. Nothing. The vial passed to Rogar. The captain lifted the silver mask with a gauntleted hand. The face beneath was a geography of old ruin, ragged scarring crossing cheek and jaw, a bite taken from him by something that wanted more. He swallowed the salt and replaced the mask. His voice came softer than before. "A werewolf," he said, not as boast, but ledger. "Years ago, I killed it with a serving fork after I bled out most of its appetite with my blade. I prefer the mask." Carvendale cleared his throat from near the door, as if rescuing the room from its own stillness. "My lord, the staff have prepared quarters." He glanced to the hunters. "If you require anything before your arrangements." "Before we leave," Edrin said, letting it be known they do not intend to stay the night, "we walk the halls." Drymorn's smile returned, pleasant as a locked box. "By all means. Hunt the shadows in my house, witch hunter. If they hide, I will be offended on your behalf." They moved from room to room, with Dal's keyring whispering at each door. He named spaces without flourish: armory, trophy hall, winter gallery. Sometimes a lantern dimmed as they passed, and a hush followed, as if their footsteps stepped in and out of someone else's conversation. While searching the study, Thaddeus, half murmuring to himself, noticed a scrap of parchment half burned in the coals, its edges curled and blackened by heat. He drew it free with care. The ink had run, but a few words remained legible. "Take the new route. Do not take the old direction. Deliver before the lanterns fade." CD. He turned it over, the paper cracking softly between his fingers. Edrin glanced down at it, his voice low. "Drymorn's initials." Thaddeus frowned. "Looks like a draft he meant to burn. Maybe he changed his mind, or another copy went out." Edrin studied the half-burned mark along the edge. Either way, he didn't want it found. The lantern on the wall hissed once, the flame guttering before steadying again. Thaddeus slipped the note into his coat, the smell of smoke lingering in the air as they moved on. In the Lord's bedchamber, Edrin and Thaddeus worked without show. Wire, hooks, a spill of iron filings beneath the sill, a file tucked where an unwary foot would break it, and spread a slick that burned cold. Bells with their tongues wrapped to ring only when cut. They looked up to see Drymorn observing them from the doorway. "You won't sleep here," Edrin said. "Take a pallet in the cellar with 2 doors between you and the stairs." Drymorn watched the care with a collector's attention, amused and slightly insulted. "If I wake to a chorus of bells, shall I applaud you or the spectre?" "Whichever you like," Edrin said. They descended to the lower rooms. The cellar smelled of damp stone and cork. Dahl carried a lantern that threw steady light. When it flickered once, he steadied it with his palm, as if that could teach it better manners. "You've served him long?" Kane asked without looking at the driver. "Long enough," Dell said. "Longer than most." He hesitated, then offered a small shard of himself. "He has no heir. Says a house should not pass to a stranger who merely knows which spoon is which." His mouth quirked, humor without warmth. "He teaches sometimes. In his way, but I learn by observation, and he knows it." The lantern hissed softly. "Some find those lessons are expensive, as those bandits found out." He looked toward the manor's dark windows. Maybe he thinks I'll remember enough to keep the lights burning when he no longer can. Or maybe he just wants to see if I'll burn with them. They left the place of Drymawn's makeshift bed, settled behind iron and oak, and walked back up to the wide doors. Outside, the rain had become fine needles. The wagon waited beneath the portico, boards dark with wet. At the threshold, Drymawn laid down the last pieces on his unseen board. "Gold now," he said, indicating a coffer Dahl had readied. The weight of it answered any question about seriousness. More upon proof. And the manor itself, deed and all, when this is ended. I prefer my hunting lodges quiet. But as you can see from the dimming flames, this one has visitors. He lifted his glass in farewell, as if they were friends who had merely discussed weather. Rogar stood a pace behind him, still and unreadable. The silver face did not move when he spoke. "If you have word for the Lord, or need to reach him again, send it by one of his ravens. They'll find their way here when no road will." "We'll find where it crawled from," Edrin said. "And who opened the door?" "See that you do," Drymawn murmured, "before another lantern goes dark." Carvendale walked them out beneath the dripping eaves. Rain whispered down from the manor roof, pooling in the ruts beside the wagon. "The Lord will have me drive you back," he said, adjusting his coat. He hesitated, his eyes drifting over the wagon's boarded frame. "A pity these planks hide such fine craftsmanship, but the Lord values his privacy in times like these." A faint, knowing smile touched his face. "Still, I suspect you could find your way back if you needed to." Paper shields sometimes give the worried comfort, even when the swords are already drawn. As they climbed back into the wagon, Edrin paused at the step. "Driver." With a nod, the driver said, "Carven is fine." "You see too much to be invisible," said Edrin. Dahl's eyes flickered. "Seeing is cheap. Surviving is not." He closed them in, then took the bench and set the team in motion. The wheels found their song again. The manor shrank behind them into a ridge of shadow crowned with unsteady light. Somewhere in its walls a lantern fluttered and steadied, as if catching its breath. Ahead the road fell into valleys of fog and climbed to high ground where the cloud-thin sky showed a few hard stars. Kane watched them through a single crack, marking the angles. Edrin sat with his hands on the hilt across his knees, gaze fixed past the boards, as if sight alone could carve memory through them. Thaddeus counted softly under his breath. The rhythm of turns, the measures between jolts, a map built from motion and instinct. Grail breathed slow, catching the scent of damp earth, pine, and smoke, filing each away like markers in the dark. Behind them, on a hill of shifting light, a lord arranged his pieces. Somewhere farther away, something listened at thresholds and waited for a door to open. What passed for daylight tried to crawl over the horizon, not sunlight, but the orange glow of a sun forever trapped behind the eclipse.